All of a sudden, as the weight comes off of his right leg, you see that bump shift backwards, boom, right there, as the tibia shifts back into its normal position. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and if you're new here and you enjoy learning about the medical side and the anatomy of different sports injuries, then be sure and like this video and subscribe for all future updates. Unfortunately, the mechanism of Kattar's injury fits with an ACL tear, and usually we don't say that too definitively unless we see the specific shift in the leg like we saw happen actually twice here with Kattar. This was actually the second time at the beginning of the second round where we see what we call this anterior tibial subluxation. So right here, as Kattar has all of his weight on his back right leg, you see this little bit of a bump, this abnormal contour in his right leg. This bump that we're seeing is actually the top of his tibia that's shifted forward, oftentimes because of, unfortunately, a torn ACL. All of a sudden, as the weight comes off of his right leg, you see that bump shift backwards, boom, right there, as the tibia shifts back into its normal position. This was the awkward move in the first round where it initially was injured, and you can see how he plants here. A couple different things to look out for. Number one, he's landing on a relatively straight leg. Number two, his right foot is rotated outwards, which is going to cause his tibia or his shin bone to rotate in a little bit. And then as he lands and comes down, we see the same sort of thing. That knee has unfortunately fallen inward, and then we see that subluxation and that pop right there as that tibia has shifted back up into its normal position. Even when Kattar was on the ground here, it looked like there was still some abnormal kind of subluxation of that tibia where we could see how rounded that is right here. Next, we'll talk about the anatomy and dive more into the mechanisms, but first I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video. This video is sponsored by Kattar, a company that you actually see in every one of my videos because they're the maker of these fantastic shirts that I'm always wearing. These are the best dress shirts I've ever worn. Number one, they're extremely comfortable. The material is very lightweight. It's almost like an athletic wear type of material that's very flexible, it moves easily with you, and it's not hard and scratchy like some other dress shirts. They're wrinkle-free and stain-free. You can pour something on your shirt and it's just gonna run right off. And they're sustainable because each shirt is made with the equivalent of 15 recycled plastic bottles. I'm a big fan of their pattern shirts, but they also have a number of different ties. They've got solid shirts. Recently, they introduced polo shirts, which are extremely comfortable, as well as a blazer and even pants. So they have everything covered for comfortable performance dress wear at honestly a very affordable price. And right now that price is going to be even better because Kattar is offering 25% off your purchase with code Brian25. Click the link in the description to save more on what's honestly already an incredible value for what you get. They look great, they feel great, and it's hands down the best dress shirt I've ever worn. Thank you again to Kattar for sponsoring today's video and making sure I'm always looking sharp for these, and let's get back to our learning. If we look at our BioDigital Anatomy tool here, I've shown the 4 key ligaments of the knee. Of course, on the inside of the right knee is going to be the MCL, the outside, the LCL, and then deep inside the knee are going to be the 2 cruciate ligaments. Shown in red here is the ACL, and then back on the backside of the knee is going to be the PCL. If we make the femur, the thigh bone, a little bit transparent here so that we can see through it, you'll notice the direction, if I also hide the MCL, that the ACL here in red runs. So this is the front of the knee, and this is the back or the posterior. So the ACL runs from the front of the shin bone to the back of the femur. What this means is that it prevents the tibia or the shin bone from moving anterior or forward relative to the thigh bone. So therefore, if the ACL is torn, you lose that restraint of the shin bone going forward, and that leads to when we see this anterior shift or this anterior subluxation in the shin bone. If we go to the triple box here and look again at that subluxation, we're focusing on Kattar's right leg. He plants, that force goes through the knee. Unfortunately, with a deficient ACL, we see that shin bone pop forward because, again, there's no restraint. But then as the weight comes off of the leg and he sort of continues through this whole motion, then all of a sudden we see the tibia, boom, right there, kind of snap back into place. Our knee has more restraints than just the ACL to this motion. Actually, the hamstrings on the back of the knee are going to be an active stabilizer of this. And we can also see with Kattar, we can see his hamstrings try to fire to stabilize the knee. As he steps back that second time, you can see here how there's kind of this firing, this contraction right there where we get that sharp outline of his hamstring muscles. His hamstrings are trying to fire to keep his knee as stable as possible, but unfortunately it can't, and we see that shift backwards. This might look really familiar to what we saw with Alexander Rakic earlier in the year. He had a very similar mechanism. In his case here again, we could see that tibia shifted forward, and then as he kind of released his weight, all of a sudden, boom, we see it kind of pop back into place. So this, unfortunately, same type of position, same sort of mechanism with what we're seeing. in terms of that tibia being subluxed or displaced anterior when the ACL is deficient, and then snapping back into place. Now, of course, the caveat here is you can't diagnose 100% certainty an ACL tear from video, but this talks about kind of that mechanism and fits with when we'll see the ACL tear. If we see that shift in the tibia, to me, that implies there's at least a partial tear of the ligament. And we have to remember that there's other injuries that can occur along with just the ACL. You can have a meniscus tear, you can have an MCL tear, you can have injury to the cartilage. So what we see is a mechanism of injury with sort of a varying spectrum of severity depending on how the forces are all distributed. Kattar is certainly going to have an MRI here, and I'll be shocked if the ACL looks normal because, again, whenever we see that shift in the tibia, that's pretty darn reliable to suggest that the ACL has been torn. But to run through all this one more time with Kattar here, as he lands on that right leg, his foot is externally rotated, it's a little bit pronated. That's going to cause his tibia to internally rotate relative to his femur or the thigh bone, and we get this sudden force coming up through the ground on a relatively straight leg where that ACL can potentially just pop, resulting in that knee falling inward and seeing that shift in the tibia moving anterior relative to the thigh bone and then popping back into place whenever the weight is released off the leg. Again, here in the second round, when Kattar steps back, same sort of loading position on the knee. We see this abnormal contour, this kind of bump right there that pops up. That's the front of the tibia or the shin bone. And then as the weight is released off of his knee, we see it all of a sudden sublux and pop back into its proper position. That's it for the video, everybody. I hope this was educational. Let me know down below what you learned and if you enjoyed this. And until next time, we'll see you later.